Okay. So, welcome everyone to our conversation about generative AI in the workplace. We can call it ChatGPT, but it's basically AI that generates text. We ask it a question and we get an answer, right or wrong. In my field, I'm tasked with teaching college-age students writing and literature. If students ask generative AI to write their papers for them to save time or effort, it's usually a big mistake in my class. The sources are more often than not completely fabricated, and even worse, if ChatGPT doesn't know the poem or the short story it's been asked to write about, it will just fabricate something. We call that hallucination. This flaw is actually somewhat helpful to me as a professor because it makes it easy to catch the fakes. And strangely, I've heard in the newer versions, the hallucinations have gotten worse. But it doesn't make me happy to fail students, so I've stopped using um, I've stopped using the learning management system in teaching online courses. And for all of my in-person classes, writing is now done in class in black and white marble notebooks, which many of you may remember. It's a big change and it feels like we're going back in time, and it will be a struggle. But I'm being paid to teach students to write and analyze, and they've paid tuition to have the opportunity to do that. So that's what we should be focusing on. I make it clear to my students it'll be inappropriate to use AI for my class, but their other professors may tell them it's fine in their class. So, as we discuss AI in your workplaces today, I would ask that you keep these students in mind as your audience. They're wondering what's next for them. Will their employer expect them to use AI in the workplace, or will it be considered inappropriate? So basically, what advice do you have for students? Specifically, I wonder if you could share whether you're required to use AI in your role, and if so, were you trained to use AI in your workplace? On the other hand, do you see natural limitations in using AI at your job? For example, is there something that AI can't do that you need to do in your job? And we'll start with Layla. Um, Layla has a master's in public health from Stony Brook University. You've worked at nonprofit organizations in New York, Long Island, Madagascar, and now in Australia. You've also worked in the pharmaceutical industry in cancer drug research as a consultant. In case people aren't familiar with what public health is, it's a very broad field. People who work in the public health sector aim to improve people's lives by improving various aspects of a healthy environment and life. So, question for you, Layla. Do you think generative AI or ChatGPT, as you've seen it used in the workplace, has made your work easier or more difficult?
Well, thank you for the introduction, and I'm happy to be here. And that's a great question because I've worked in consultancy and I've also worked in nonprofits, and I think I have a different answer for both, but it's helpful and there's some drawbacks. So I might just take some time to explain those. When I was working in the pharmaceutical industry, it was very useful to understand AI. There are a lot of advances in research and in the medical field in general that are approaching AI and trying to integrate it. So, from that perspective, it was really, really important. And it made my life easier to understand how AI is used and how it works on the back end. I worked with developing a chatbot, AI chatbot, to help doctors interface with the products that we were developing to understand how they work in a real time context when they were perhaps trying to prescribe them to patients and things like that. So I helped on the back end try to develop that tool. It helped me feel a little bit more comfortable with AI, but at the same time, there are drawbacks, and I could see where those things fall through. In another context, as far as my day to day work as well, being a consultant, you take a lot of meetings, and chatbot or AIs can help collate minutes and things like that on the back end that you can refer to later. I saw some people rely too heavily on those notes that were too general, really, in the outputs. So the human touch is super important. So relying on it too heavy was always a drawback, and you could see it make people's life and work harder. Um,
Could you give an
and
example of that?
yeah, for example, I would work with a couple of people who might use an AI tool to listen to the meeting, for example, and then generate notes on the back end. The notes that they would send afterwards would just be a little too general or maybe just wrong. And it's because the AI tool doesn't understand the context of these meetings. So it's kind of spitting back out maybe jargon that doesn't make sense or something like that. So it really would take away because you look at this meeting notes and they just kind of not have any context at all, and there's really no reference points. So I always thought it was more important to take handwritten notes or typing notes on the side of the meetings because, even if the AI tool is spitting back out general information, it could just kind of be nonsense at the end of the day. So, that could just be a development issue, and over time it'll change. But from what I noticed, it was always a drawback, and it kind of made people's lives harder. Because if you tried to refer to them later, it just didn't really make any sense.
Can I ask,
Yeah.
in your working on the chatbot, did you
Mhm.
have a similar kind of issue with that?
Yeah, the chatbot we would test it frequently, and sometimes it would spit back the wrong information. So it would, even though we developed it, yeah, exactly, and even though we were developing it and we were testing it and building it on the back end, people would prompt, the testers would prompt it, and it would spit back a completely wrong output.
Hmm.
So it was our job to go back and kind of figure out what that was and why it did that, and then fix it on the back end. But you could just see how frequently that happens. No matter how much you go and edit it, it's it's doing its own thing too.
Doctors
Um,
were using it, so I mean that I could see.
yeah, well, at the time we was still not live yet, but yeah, there's always a risk of that, of course.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. All right.
yeah,
Wow. Um, so I wonder if we could ask Allie. Um, Allie has a BA in business. I'm very interested in what you're going to have to say. Allie has a BA in business from Virginia Tech and an MA in mental health counseling from New York University. You have such an interesting work trajectory. You worked in the payments industry and made a career change to become a mental health counselor in New York. I know there are limits to what you can talk about regarding interactions with patients, but I hope you can share enough to give us a sense of what your work looks like. And here's your question. Um, Recently, ChatGPT has been in the news because people have used it as an aid for mental wellness, or to guide their behavior. How do you see your role in light of this?
Of course. And thank you for having me.
Mhm.
Um, I'm specifically going to talk more about the mental health space because I think we have others on the call who are more embedded in the business world than I am because I've been removed for it for a few years now. But when I think of AI in the mental health space, my mind immediately goes to ethics. It's the backbone of our profession. Ethics protects client safety and well-being, which is um, the reason we do our jobs. There's something at the beginning when we initiate a relationship with a patient, and it's called informed consent. Informed consent allows the patient to know what they're signing up for, to understand they're consenting to mental health treatment. Within informed consent, there's also a confidentiality clause that their information is protected within the walls of the therapy room, whether that's an in-person office or a virtual telehealth appointment. And lastly, there within the informed consent, there is a duty as a mandated reporter. All mental health counselors, social workers, psychologists are mandated reporters in their state in which they're licensed. And within that, there's a duty to report. So we learn that there is harm or threat of harm being done to someone or a group of people. We are ethically responsible to report that. And there, within each state, there's processes to complete that. So, like following this idea of harm, assessing safety and risk levels is a huge part of my job that I take really seriously. I'm required to assess risk every 6 months. And within that process, I look for patients' risk and protective factors, as well as assess for suicidal and homicidal ideation. We assign them a risk level, and there's processes in place within each risk level to ensure they're getting the appropriate level of care. And if their risk is deemed too high, that's and out of the scope of our role, we're responsible for ensuring that they seek outside resources and get them to a higher level of care.
Mm-hmm.
Bring this all up because in the headlines today, we're seeing that maybe this isn't happening when people are seeking mental health services through AI, such as ChatGPT. I'm not sure if there are processes in place in terms of what reporting is being done and if there is harm identified, if there's appropriate places to direct them to receive that higher level of care. There's not currently much regulation. I know in the state of Illinois, they're the first state to ban mental health AI services, and it'll be interesting to see if more states start to follow. I want to comment. I can't say if there should never be AI in the mental health space at all, given the gaps that exist today in mental health care. From a financial standpoint, it's not widely accepted by most insurers in the states. Also, there's more demand than supply, and there's also a stigma that comes along with that. I guess I'll close with a lot of what I just spoke about is more mechanical, but I want to close with that, as both a patient of therapy and a provider of therapy, there is something to be said about the energy, the connective energy that's felt in the room between two people or a small group of people that fosters this human connection that, is what we're all seeking for, to be understood, to be seen, to feel safe. And I don't know if AI could ever replace that or if it even should, because it's in that environment of connection and safety where healing happens.
Mm-hmm. Totally. When you see examples, I've watched videos of, people consulting ChatGPT for a mental health question, and it certainly sounds very comforting, whatever's coming out, and to the point of sycophancy almost, like it's telling you what you want to hear, or something like that. And I just you could imagine that it's sounding very human. But again, if you're on the verge of self-harm, what is that entity going to do?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It can mimic a human. And I think that's one of my concerns too, is the information that it's being fed, right?
Mhm.
Um, is it being kept confidential and private? And how is that information being used
Mm, mm,
to, to help mimic that human connection? I don't know.
right. Yeah, good point. All right. Okay, so moving on to Iman. Iman has an RN from Drexel University, a master's in nursing education from Western Governors University. You are an interesting mix of the sciences and the humanities, because you've also got a degree in communication, I know, communication and nursing, double major, which I think is great because effective communication is so important in healthcare. I hope you can share a bit about the roles you've had as you've worked in hospitals on Long Island and in Manhattan. I know you found yourself heading up one of the very first COVID wards in the city at Mount Sinai Hospital, which I'm sure was incredibly difficult and a life-changing experience for you and many others. And now you're an assistant nurse manager for a neurosurgical ICU. Um, so question for you. When you think about the floor nursing that you've done and the new nurses coming into the field, what kind of advice would you give them about ChatGPT?
My advice for nurses, of course, ChatGPT is so helpful. It's like this rich, fast, like vast amount of information that pulls data from all over. So, like in a pinch, you could get a crash course on a medication, on like a disease process. You could put information in of like, how do I phrase this nicely? Or like thinking of like communication skills where maybe you have like you need like conflict resolution in like a quick scenario, and you could be like, how do I phrase this in such a way that would like de-escalate a situation? So those ways are helpful. The one area where I could see it turning into an issue is looking up like, how do I do something? Um, And every hospital has protocols in place that are very specific to that process, um, and using the equipment that they have available, which you are protected under your license with those protocols in place. So if you're operating outside of those specific protocols, then your license is in jeopardy. So you can figure out how to do things online, but unless you're pulling up like that specific hospital's protocol and you remember it and you understand it, and that's how you learn it and operate at that hospital, then if something happens, what was your reference? Like, why did you do it that way? And you can't recreate what you looked at on ChatGPT, but that's also not in your protocol. You have to use uh the specific equipment that you have, the directions from that equipment that your hospital provides and their protocol. And their protocol is like a vetted process based on like sentinel events or patient events or safety things that have happened that they've tweaked and modified with their workflow for it to be this way every time at this hospital. So, yes, you can like learn so much from ChatGPT, but for protecting your license and all this schooling that you've had and just like staying in lane, really just do it the way you learn and remember to with the protocols in place.
Hmm.
I could see issues happening with that. Um, because it's like a summary of probably all of the different ways people do things, but you're protected in learning in the way of your hospital.
Hmm. I like that, protecting your license, protecting your job. What about patient impact? Like, have you seen, God forbid, somebody using artificial intelligence to try to do something, or have you heard stories of,
I haven't I don't see like in throughout my entire nursing career, and I haven't witnessed it.
people don't really?
Not that I've seen. I don't like because we're so strict in how we do things.
Hmm.
I could see I could see how students use it through school because things are more general and passing tests and learning theory. Um, but I think that the problem that might occur, and I do kind of see this in the hospital, is when students or newly graduated nurses, like within the past couple years, who maybe their schooling was partially like hybrid or online, and their patient care experiences were limited in person because of COVID. So, like on the unit, using like learning how to like figure things out, critically think in the moment, and utilize all of their resources, that I think is a little bit slower because, or like thinking on their feet and like putting things together, because I worry that people are relying a lot on like AI. And then in real life situations where time is super critical, like being able to like put a lot of things together in the moment
Mm,
and like operate and like rely on your different coworkers and understanding the system. And I think the biggest thing with nursing is you will never know everything. Never. Like no one will ever know everything, but it's like, how do you figure it out? And it's just once you understand, like, okay, I need to go to this person, I need to do this, I need to look that up, and like safely knowing how to like get information to bring it to your patient and get everything done. I don't think it should involve ChatGPT. I think it should stay with the education system and the protocols that are in place in the hospital, and that's going to keep everybody safe.
mm,
So,
good. Good answer. Makes me feel better.
yeah.
Okay. Shall we go to Lauren? You can take yourself off mute.
Yep.
Yeah. Lauren has a bachelor's from San Jose, California. And your major was
Marketing. Yeah.
marketing, yes. And you worked in, well, go ahead, tell us.
Yeah. For the last about a little over 11 years, I've been in digital advertising and most recently in advertising sales across a couple of our larger social media platforms. So I work with brands that want to advertise on these specific platforms and help them reach their goals, whether it's top of the funnel from awareness or bottom funnel if they are more focusing on getting you, the consumer, to make a purchase.
Mm. So do people use AI to do their job
Yeah.
where you work?
It's it's interesting. I feel like just in the last year, I think probably like most folks have really seen a spike in conversations around AI, ChatGPT, and other platforms. And I myself have used it a lot more in the last year. I'll say internally, our insights team, a lot of internal teams have started to really dive into AI to help people like me who are client facing and on the sales side to help us be a lot more or just be able to provide our clients with a lot more insights around trends that are happening on these platforms, conversations that are happening, where they're happening, and what type of people are having these conversations. So those tools have been extremely helpful in my role of being able to tell a more cohesive story of why you should advertise on this platform and really proving out that we're reaching the right people at the right time. For my personal use, I have found similar to Iman, I've found that it's been really helpful when I'm having challenging client conversations. If I have to write a challenging email with maybe not the greatest news in the world, how to properly kind of phrase the email where, we can really still highlight the positive or just help outline next steps has been really beneficial in leveraging ChatGPT. Sometimes at the end of the day, I will have a lot of notes that I want to send a client with a lot of different numbers. And I'll ask ChatGPT to help me write a nicely and a clear and concise email because sometimes my notes can be very long. So that has been really helpful. But I will say to Layla's point is you do have to be careful with the outputs. The tool doesn't know all the nuances of my relationship with my client, all the background, and ultimately their goals. So really making sure that, I kind of take the output with a grain of salt. I do have to make changes. I do have to change wording, but it has been really helpful in just kind of helping me with an outline, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, have you ever received, this is just, I'm just curious now, have you ever received something from someone else and it was clearly written by AI and you felt like, tell me, how do you feel when you receive something like that?
Yeah, I absolutely have. And I think to my point, it makes you ponder a little bit like, oh, did they reread this email? Because like I said, I can't fault them. I use it.
Yeah.
But I like to think that I'm proofreading it two or three times to really make sure it's also in my tone as well,
Mm,
right? I do want to
right.
make sure that, and it is coming from me. It's all of my thoughts. I just sometimes I leverage it to kind of put it together in a nice way. So not that it's bad, but you do kind of think like, okay, maybe this person could have taken another read at the output.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. Um, so we're going to go to Ali. Um, Ali, you have a BA in philosophy from the University of Delaware, and you've been working in payments for quite a few years in New York and San Francisco. And you're at the executive level at your company. In your role, of course, you have a team and you often deal with top executives at other Fortune 500 companies. Um, you, of all the people that I know, have leveraged critical thinking, strategic thinking, and communication skills the most. However, at the same time, I know that when you're speaking or writing, you're keenly aware of your audience. And so I'm wondering, maybe following what Lauren was just talking about, how does that play out for you?
Yeah, I'd say that it's difficult to develop voice when you're using AI or ChatGPT for that. And there's two sides of it. One is developing voice, and when you're working through your own career and trying to build relationships with executives and clients, they want to know who you are, how you think, how you build arguments. Like that's how you become persuasive, both in the development of arguments, but also knowing who you are. And so you create a wedge between the people that need to trust you, including clients and these executives, when you're not showing up as yourself. And so
Mm.
AI makes it really difficult to connect, I find, similar to kind of what Ali was saying in the realm of therapy. You also need it in the relationships, with clients in the business world. And with executives that are trusting you to go execute. So it's that's a huge liability, I'd say, both in the development of your voice, but then also when you're actually trying to make arguments, when you're actually trying to convince people of things, the AI doesn't really get it just right. It's helpful getting from like 0 to 50% on just about anything, but getting from 50% to 100, it's got to be you. And the more specialized the field is, the more jargony it is, or the more context is needed in order to do problem solving, the more of those hallucinations you'll see, the more kind of confident guesswork shows up in the AI's responses. And if you use it, or if you use it blindly, um, you end up just being confidently wrong, which is sort of the worst version of being wrong, especially with clients and with executives. So I'm very careful when I use it. I mostly use it for like kind of deep research, like Google on steroids. I often ask it for sources after it provides me information, and then it'll send me a bunch of links that I can then go validate. Um, and I'll also use it for kind of contextual acronyms. And if a client brings something up in a meeting that's very specific to their industry, I could quickly just look it up and have the AI give me that background, that context real time. So there are uses for it, but not for the most critical functions of my work. Um, and so it's difficult to rely on it day to day. It's more of a tool, like others have said, for transcribing, note taking, doing a little bit of summary, but it needing to be checked. But beyond that, it's pretty difficult to use it for real sort of executive functions. if you're not practicing that skill, it ends up being a liability to you.
Mm. Oh, wow. That sounds kind of scary, actually. Have you ever seen anybody crash with that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people at the company become overly reliant on it, and the work that they put out is not the best. It feels a little bit hollow. It doesn't hit the mark in terms of convincing anyone of anything,
Mhm.
or demonstrating the credibility on a topic, or getting to the depth of problem solving that you need before you can make a really important decision that has millions of dollars on the line. So it's not one of those things that is going to advance you at the higher end of your career. It's probably going to be able to help you um, get sort of a baseline understanding of things. But when I see emails or analysis or reports that is mostly leveraging AI and sort of like generative responses, it's not the best. I
Mm.
will say though that not even just on like writing emails and reports and those things. Outside of that, there are other generative AI functions that, at least in payments, we're looking at using around sort of product recommendations and um, uh, customization and personalization. But um, but those are highly curated experiences, and so it's sort of different from the Gen AI that we're talking about. I think there's a use and a purpose for it, but when it comes to being a tool for you to go do your job, if you become overly reliant on it, then it's a liability.
Mm. Okay. Oh, excuse me for one second. My laptop is needs to be plugged in. Sorry. Don't want to lose you all. Okay. Thank you, Ellie. And now we move to Mitch. Mitch has a BS in Geographical Sciences from Curtin University in Australia. You are a geologist working with the mining industry in Western Australia, and you're based in the Perth area. I know in your spare time you dig around in the bush a bit. Um, but you're also one of the organizers of what has been described as one of the biggest mineral and geoscience expos in Australia. And I also know that education is a big part of that endeavor. And you and your colleagues asked the vendors to embody the spirit of education with activities and learning opportunities in the expo.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I really appreciate that educational aspect. Um, so do you have you seen helpful ways in which AI has been used in your field? And conversely, do you see potentially dangerous ways that AI could be used or has been used in your field?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, yes to both, essentially. So I think the biggest thing within my particular field is that a lot of the time that we spend kind of doing my role is split probably half half between field activities, gathering data, field heavy skills, taking measurements, gathering data. And then the second half of that is, I guess, analyzing that. And from there, kind of doing, I guess, more science based kind of approach to the data. So AI and generative AI is great in all of these things to kind of streamline some of this, but essentially it is a powerful tool that needs guardrails and oversight. There's absolutely kind of no way for a lot of this field activity at the moment to kind of be gathered by this, but then if we feed raw and kind of, I guess, unseen data into that, just to use that as a direct output, it opens us up to massive liabilities. So everything within these kind of needs oversight in these. So what I guess within my role, I personally see the pros would be rapidly analyzing lots of, I guess, technical reports or papers. So I'd feed them into we use an internal AI for the business that I'm in. So we don't put things into, for example, ChatGPT because it opens us up to potential liabilities. I work for a publicly listed company. If we were to put our data within there and then there's a leak or something, we are open potentially to someone knowing critical information relative to our business. So we use an internal AI model trained on our own data and managed in-house. I use it personally for lots of kind of troubleshooting with like doing like coding and some other bits and pieces. So I find that extremely helpful when I'm trying to troubleshoot something for hours, and in the end I feed it in and say, look, why isn't this working? I sometimes get a response that helps me kind of streamline my workflow in that space. Similar to what I guess Ali and Lauren were talking about before. I guess I do use it for a tone check, but I would never write emails personally with ChatGPT or another AI model. As Ali was saying, I think voice is extremely important with communicating science, and you lose a lot of that. I guess persuasive or that kind of language when you and you need to understand. You need to understand what you're kind of doing and talking about. And my personal role, I'm questioned often in person. Someone will walk up to me and say, "Hey, Mitch, what do you know about X, Y, Z?" And I'll on the spot have to kind of give them, I guess, a synopsis, and I won't, I guess, have the ability or time to sit and run something through an AI. So, I guess some of the risks. So with big data sets and specifically geological models and things like that, misinterpretation is a big factor. So it's always good, and we cross check all each other's work extremely regularly. I work in a pretty hierarchical system where we will make these observations or other things and then run it by other people. Running it through a model is very general, and is not really fit for purpose yet. Potentially one day, but for the time being, absolutely not. It opens us up to some big kind of expensive mistakes. So if we dig in the wrong area, it could cost us millions and millions of dollars. So. And as I mentioned, I'll loop back to privacy breaches, things like that. At the moment, there's online evidence that things put within ChatGPT and other things are not exactly, secure. So we only, and it's extremely severe penalty otherwise within my business to post our data online. So, immediately fired kind of situation. So. We also don't feed any safety or personal information through the business, even the internal business AI. In the case that, for example, there's an external cyber attack or something like that, if we within our industry at large had fatalities and things like that, it could be that these are misinterpreted at large, or it could have financial ramifications for the business. So, I think that's a pretty general synopsis. I don't know. Is there any questions on this, I guess?
Yeah, I guess my biggest question is about safety because I uh visited Australia and I saw how big the machinery is,
Absolutely.
and when I think about mistakes, I think about, the human cost, not just money. And yeah.
Absolutely, and I guess an example of the safety. I work at a very large corporation with 20,000 members with my business, particularly, and the area that I work, there's a site of 600 people. One of our key safety people at the moment is starting to use a particular AI in regard to managing a lot of their own internal systems. So at the moment, it's used just to train and feed information, and we use it as we call it a lead safety index. So it might, for example, say, in the last 6 months, 300 people have stubbed their toe or something, but by the data it gets fed, it starts looking at trends where within the business, it can increase safety. But at the end of the day, it's on each individual person. So, and there's no, I guess, accountability within these models. It has to be person to person. So that's never going to change, in my opinion.
Right, accountability. That's yeah. Yeah. So I wonder if anybody has any stray thoughts or things that you wanted to add in, or speaking to someone else's point so far.
I will just touch on one that I guess Lauren and Ali were saying before in regard to if I've received emails and things like that in an AI tone. I had a performance review recently, and I was reading the notes from my superior, and they were all AI written. And I challenged him directly on it. we're having a one-on-one discussion here. I've known him for 4 or 5 years. I know him extremely well, and it wasn't in his tone. And it immediately set a bit of a tone for the meeting. So it was kind of like I asked him directly, and he admitted, yeah, he ran it all through a ChatGPT-esque model and got that, and asked him if what he wrote was what he meant, and yeah, he agreed that it was, but it just put it in a more flowery way. So it can, I guess, set the tone in the wrong way in certain circumstances as well. And I think there is a time and a place for this kind of thing. But interpersonal communication, especially in a workplace or in life in general, I think is just one of the more important things.
Hmm. Yeah, when I think about myself, if someone ever um, had to review me or something, I would look for, I I appreciate being seen, like a human pair of eyes, recognizing um, things that I do well and things where, places where I could improve. So I want the feel of a human being. I need that voice, especially for a review. Um, yeah, that's what makes it valuable. So I almost
Look,
feel like ChatGPT would take away the essential value of that process to me. I
I,
don't,
I agree. Yeah.
yeah. Anybody else?
I had just had one additional thought. Just with how to use it in a really positive light. And this is a little bit more technical than my skills are currently, but it has this story kind of is encouraging me to maybe dig in and expand my AI skill set and learning how I can leverage this tool in a more positive way. There's actually a gentleman at work, and he works on a different team. So his leadership requires different type of information when they meet for their one-on-ones, right? To discuss client challenges, his conversations, what's going on in his world. And I was actually speaking with his manager, and he had talked about all these very specific items he asks of his team. And this individual was newer to his team. So his first few one-on-ones, his notes weren't quite as detailed as his leadership were requiring. So there was definitely a learning curve. So this individual then decided to build out a personalized AI model based on all of the feedback that he had received from his manager, to the point where he could then take his notes for his preparation notes for his meeting, put it into this model, and it would spit out a grade for him. And it wouldn't necessarily fill in any information. It would just say, you're missing X, Y, and Z, or you're missing this number here, or you should give more detail here based on the criteria that you have given this model. So I thought it was a really interesting way to leverage ChatGPT in a positive way. And again, it's not necessarily putting additional, words in your mouth. It's strictly just telling you where you can improve. So again, the way that he built this is definitely over my head, but has encouraged me to kind of carve out time to dig in a little bit more into some of the additional positive ways that we can really use these AI tools.
Well, that's interesting for self-improvement.
Yeah,
You establishing the bar for yourself and then letting the AI model keep you accountable to
mhm,
what you said you wanted to do.
exactly.
Interesting. Hmm. Anyone else? All right. Well, I thank you all for your time and very generous of you to share these experiences from your workplaces. And Thank you so much. I think the students will really appreciate what you've shared today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.